Hey everyone, welcome to the Dev Interrupted Remote Engineering Panel Watch Party. I'm your host and panel moderator, Dan Lines, and I have the pleasure of introducing the new leaders of remote work. We have Darren Murph, GitLab's Global Head of Remote, Lawrence Mandel, Director of Engineering at Shopify, Shweta Saraf, Senior Director of Engineering at Equinix, and Chris Downard, VP of Engineering at GigSmart. We are so excited to have all of you here today, and I know the Dev Interrupted community is stoked to hear from all of you. Now, remote work was an important topic before the COVID-19 pandemic, but the abrupt change from viewing remote work as the future to kind of an immediate necessary shift caught many companies flat-footed. So being forced into a foreign environment, being suddenly remote is a challenge, but remote work doesn't have to be. So today's agenda is pretty straightforward. We'll be talking about successful remote work in an engineering organization broken up into 4 categories: meetings and workflow, KPIs and goals, hiring and onboarding, and people and culture. So let's dig right into our remote work conversation, starting with meetings and workflow. And Darren, let's start the topic off with you. So I've heard you say that successful remote work comes down to key building blocks: workspace, communication, and mindset. Can you explain how organizations, particularly engineering organizations, can optimize remote workflows for team members?
Yeah, it all starts with being very intentional about your organizational design. So if you think about a co-located organization, a lot of thought goes into what is inside of a building, how the elevators work, what the office spaces look like, connectivity, so on and so forth. So at least that much rigor and intentionality needs to go into your virtual organizational design. And for a lot of companies, this is brand new. They've shifted into remote, but they keep working office first. And as we've seen, it's passable, it works, but it's not ultimately taking advantage of the virtual atmosphere. So at GitLab, we use GitLab, the platform, to do all of our collaboration. And that single source of truth, or that central hallway where all work is funneled through, enables us to collaborate with maximum efficiency. And we make sure that everything is as visible and transparent as possible for everyone in the organization. So the platform can change depending on the company, but it is really, really important to keep work in a central hallway. And one note on meetings, I had a chief people officer ask me, hey, how do we make our meetings better? And my response is, make them harder to have. So you want to ideally have as few meetings as possible, because work should be done in mediums other than that. Ideally, you would use asynchronous tools like GitLab to gather consensus asynchronously, and then reserve synchronous meetings for actually making a decision. And as your team gets more distributed across the globe and time zones become a greater issue, this becomes all the more important.
Yeah, actually, that totally makes sense, because that meeting fatigue, like being on Zoom or whatever you're using, can totally kick in if you're doing meetings for just like status updates as opposed to really getting something done. So having some type of platform, GitLab is a great one. At LinearB, we just came out with our we call it Worker B feature, that kind of keeps every developer in sync on, are pull requests being waiting on you? Are they open? Are they merged? So having that asynchronous coordination is super, super important. Lawrence, I know, so Shopify is known for its great remote engineering culture. So we know that. What have you done to build and adjust your workflows to enable the ability to kind of collaborate and still being focused on letting engineers get things done?
Yeah, there's something I wanted to pick up on that you just said, which was this idea of meeting fatigue and kind of Zoom fatigue. And we're all on Zoom right now. I don't know about the rest of you. I've got kids, and my kids' school over the last year has been trying to keep us involved. And one of the ways they've done that is booking these like Zoom sessions in the evening. And I just noticed I get there and I just don't want to be there. I just don't want to be on Zoom in the evening. I've been on video all day long. And something that we've been playing with more recently since Slack released it is huddles, which is audio only, and kind of takes me back to where I started my career, which was, phone calls. Everything was phone calls and like these large phone calls, but you couldn't see anybody else. And there's kind of this balance between the two, where I found, some video and some audio only can actually provide this really like a differentiation between these types of discussions that you're having during the day, and a bit of a freedom there as well. But to get more to your question, what have we done? It's interesting to note. Shopify now is 100% remote company. Like, everybody is remote. We don't have offices. We're building out what we're calling hubs, and there are areas where teams will be able to get together at some point, but everybody's remote. But it wasn't this way, right? Up until the beginning of the pandemic, we were largely a co-located company in specific set offices in cities. And so we decided to make that change. Now, it's not that we didn't have any expertise in this. And for other companies, I know, talking to some, they've seen this as well, where there's pockets that have the expertise in going remote. And so this is where I think the Shopify remote engineering culture really came from. And if you look at it, it's our production engineering team, our international team, and our support team as well, had all been distributed previously and had this expertise in there. So what are some of the things that you're talking about, right? And that meeting culture that we're getting back to. So one, I think there's kind of a mindset you want to adopt from the top. And our leadership overall, all of us have done a great job of this, of saying you need to protect focus time. And so when we saw that wasn't happening, Toby, right from the top, mandated meeting-free Wednesdays, right? And you may have seen this, like, people talk about it. Now, this is only as much as your leaders continue to enforce it and really show and set the example for it. Otherwise, meetings will bleed right back in, right? You can't just tell people there's no meetings. We also have tried tooling, and we do this periodically. We just have a chaos bot that runs, and any recurring meeting automatically gets canceled, and you have to deliberately go and reschedule them, right? It's That's all awesome. Again, about being intentional, right? You want to be intentional about these meetings. It's very easy to keep like meetings on the calendar that are there. But, getting back to something you were talking about, Darren, I think for me, the big thing is understanding, why are you meeting? Who needs to be there, right? This is just kind of good meeting etiquette. But then there is a real value to having a meeting, but more than a meeting, to having a working session. And so I've really been pushing people to find opportunities to pair with others. And again, you can do this on audio. You can do this, typically in engineering, you would think about pair programming, but it doesn't have to be programming. It may be pair reviews. It may be pair learning something. It may be pairing on an announcement or documentation that you need to write. But working with someone else and having that shared experience, but shared experience through work, through trying to get something done. I think that's the key. And so if you spend all of your day in kind of decision meetings or information sharing meetings, I think you're actually like doing yourself a disservice and misusing your time during the day. I'll stop there. So someone else can jump in on this.
Yeah, really, really interesting stuff. I know, Chris, you have something that you call coffee talk, which, could you explain what that is? It's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, sure. So it's kind of funny we're talking about Zoom fatigue, but then I'm going to talk about having, basically an all-day Zoom meeting going. Yeah, so when we went remote, we figured out you were going full remote on like a Friday, and Monday we were fully remote across the entire company. And our leadership team asked, what's your plans for your various departments? How are you going to handle this, right? It's an instant switch. And we were predominantly an in-office company at the time. So we had a few people remote around the world. And one of the things that I had noticed for collaboration was there was this need to keep people in sync that weren't in the main office, right? It's a pretty typical problem of, how do you distribute information and keep it going? So my plan was to put a Zoom meeting that doesn't end up. And we have a bot that posts every morning, somewhere around 8 a.m. Like, here's the link to Coffee Talk. Feel free to join. If everybody leaves, all of our breakout rooms close, but the first person that joins tends to make a new list of breakout rooms, and they center around projects. So there's usually 1 to 2 rooms dedicated to large ongoing projects. There's rooms for all of the committees that meet. So, architecture, back end, front end, whatever the case may be. There's a couple of random breakout rooms that kind of simulate those small conference rooms in an office, so people can kind of jump in and collaborate or pair, whatever the case may be. And we even have a room dedicated for our design team, if our design team wants to jump in and collaborate and pair. But it gives us named spaces virtually, which is really interesting. And we're LinearB users, and so I track a lot of stuff. And from like the first week that we went remote, our numbers went up. And I'm based on experiential evidence and everything that I was seeing. It's because our collaboration went up instantly. Everybody jumped into these coffee talk rooms. You can roll in and out as you see fit. We do stand-ups, we do retros, we do planning breakdowns. We do production troubleshooting. If there's an outage, we turn one of them into a command and response room. We do everything in there, and it's been amazing for our team because we've had a few people that the day that we went remote was like their start day at GigSmart, and so they never got to be part of like the office lunches and things like that. But from day one, they had a way that they could meet and interact with everybody and chat. It gives us the ability to feel like we're sitting next to someone in the office when we want to. So you have people socializing in there. It's not just for the business. It's also people just talking about their day. What did they do for the weekend? It keeps us together and bonded as a team.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I think there's kind of a balance there, right? Some teams are going to need that collaboration. Where could I go to actually talk to a human and say, what's up? How are we doing on maybe a particular project? But on the other side, Lawrence, I love the idea of this no meeting Wednesday, which I did try to implement one time. And I needed that cancel bot in order to actually cancel meetings on those days like you have, so developers can really get time to work. Shweta,
Wednesday's my favorite day of the week. I got to tell you, like it's my, like I protect it. People try to book meetings on Wednesdays, and I push back on anything. It's not religious. It's not 100%. There's times where there's a legitimate reason you need to meet. This is it's time sensitive, whatever. I'll do interviews on a Wednesday. But mostly, like, I have a full day where nothing's there and I can just work. And I think people on my team see it because this is the day where they see like all of these updates and Slack messages and like, oh, here's a new doc, here's a draft of a security plan, like whatever we happen to be working on, right? But I can make so much progress that one day. It feels great and really anchors the whole week.
Awesome. Is anyone else on the panel doing something like that, blocking time for work periods?
Yeah, we do Better Way Wednesdays as well. And again, to Lawrence's point, like this has to have commitment from the highest portion of the leadership, right? So this actually came up as an idea from an employee, and it was implemented in our organization and then eventually spread to the whole company, which is now a very big company, right? With more than like 30,000 people. So just to sort of ground that statement, like what I'm talking about is we were a small startup which were acquired by a big company right before the pandemic. So we went from like fully remote teams to rest of the company adopting remote and trying to get remote on board. So it was an interesting experience to share what we learned, but also scaling it to a big organization, which obviously takes time and change of mindset and learnings as well.
Wow, that's actually an amazing experience with the acquisition because the Equinix who acquired you were at Packet, right? You're saying they were not remote. And what were some of the key pieces of advice that you kind of passed over from your learnings from being at Packet?
Yeah, so it was interesting because like Equinix is the largest data center company, right? So they technically have offices in 200 plus locations, with some of the offices being actual hubs versus being the data centers themselves. So like Better Way Wednesdays was one, doing a lot of async meetings. Like we do like a monthly business memo, which actually captures the state of business along with achievements and challenges or blockers and the KPIs and metrics, which goes all the way to the senior leaders. So that automatically allows it to cut down few meetings where the same information is passed on in different formats or different level of abstraction to different people. So we invest in something like that, which hardly takes an hour across the board, but saves tons of time from everybody's perspective and helps with that Zoom fatigue. So we do things like that, but I think the biggest thing is the focus on async communication because of the time zones involved, and like we have people all over the world, even in engineering teams, and just like being protective of that focus time or IC time. Like a lot of our ceremonies used to be in office for Equinix, or the in office culture was very strong, right? So adopting to this whole new style of the working remote, like I think the experience that Packet brought in was definitely insightful, and I see like this cross synergy of ideas flowing from both ends, which resulted in slightly easier working environment for all of us, is what I would say.
For your agile ceremonies, like, your stand-ups, your retros, depending on the way that you are working, are you doing those asynchronously, or are you actually getting on a meeting, or like how does that work for you?
Yeah, like so the sprint planning meetings and the retro meetings, we do it in a meeting setting with people joining and stuff. But like stand-ups and all, it depends on the team. Like some teams love to get together for a quick stand-up. Many people do it over Slack. So it pretty much varies from team to team. But we try to, like, I think the key difference is we try to be remote first versus remote friendly. So we want to make sure that even if there's a developer in Indonesia, they are able to participate meaningfully and don't feel left out. So we sort of tune it based on the mix of the team and allow them to establish their practices with using tools like LinearB and our other scorecard metrics. We are able to sort of level set on how we are all going in the same direction or where we need to course correct.
Great. Anyone else? Maybe a final comment on this topic of how you're working with ceremonies, or anything different from what you've heard? Okay. I'm going to move us on now to our next topic. So our next category is metrics, KPIs, and goals. So, in my world at LinearB, data is crucial to understanding what's going on in our business and how to make engineering teams more effective. So, for example, if you don't know what your cycle time is for your engineering team, it's more difficult to understand where you have delivery bottlenecks. If you don't know how long code reviews are taking your team, it's hard to keep that review process, efficient and effective. Now, when leading remote teams, tracking and measuring, maybe becomes very different, and you need to maintain this high level of visibility and transparency. So Shweta, we're going to start with you again. You led, as we just said, a fully remote team as VP of Engineering at Packet before the acquisition. How, if at all, did you use KPIs or goal settings, and how did it change for you when you're leading remote teams? So, what are you using there for those goals and KPIs?
Yeah, so we do rocks at the organization level. So every department comes up with rocks and they sort of get trickled down to the teams. But in engineering, we also do like a Kanban style planning process where everyone knows what are the big features going out and can work together to make sure the dependencies are taken care of. But how do we actually track progress or hold ourselves accountable, right? So every Monday we start off with all company, I mean, all metal, all hands. Equinix metal is what Packet used to be. So everybody dials in Monday morning, and the first thing we do is every department head goes through these metrics, which are tracked week over week, and they explain if the number went down or went up, like what are we doing about it. And that's how we start off the week, and that builds a lot of transparency as well as accountability, that we care about these things, and we have, like, it's not like if the number is not perfect it's bad, but we are also able to own our learnings or challenges or failures, and talk to the whole company that, hey, this is what is going on, so people build more empathy for the teams that are doing some critical operational work or facing a lot of incidents that week. So that's how we do it.
That's excellent. Darren, I see that we've gotten you back here. GitLab has been fully remote, I think, since around 2011. So you've gotten a ton of experience at this. What has GitLab's experience taught you about kind of metrics to track or KPIs that are important for a remote team?
Yeah, so we like to say at GitLab that all remote forces you to do things that any business should be doing, but we have to be much more intentional about them and do them much earlier on because we don't have the office as a crutch. And so the shocker of all shocker is that most of the things we do as an all remote organization, those proven principles, are probably what you should be doing no matter where you sit on the spectrum of remote. In fact, even if everyone went back to the office full time, our meeting hygiene, our metric hygiene, I still think it makes teams more cohesive and more disciplined. So a lot of companies will come to us and say, hey, tell us what we need to know, but you're all remote, so make sure it applies. And my response is it does all apply. It has very little to do with where people are physically located and much more to do with how you think about work and how the work is structured. So as I mentioned earlier, we all use GitLab, the platform, and it's easy to see everyone's contribution graph. It's easy to see if things are moving forward or not. But really, it starts with what we call a boring solution, which is asking your direct reports, do you know what success looks like? And actually, that conversation goes both ways. And so whatever the metric is, make sure that you can write down what success looks like. And it forces you to put numbers or values around things that may be more ambiguous or esoteric. And so this will vary depending on if you're in the engineering org or the legal org or the comms org. Obviously, what you track will be different, but being able to write it down and document it enables you to track it. So there's no guesswork on, are we moving in the right direction? And I would argue that this approach makes your company much more inclusive because it puts the focus on results, not about the clothes that you wear or the charisma that you bring to the office or the aura that's around you. This is really critical in breaking all of that down and pushing politics aside and making it about the work. And this seems paradoxical to some leaders, but when you make it all about the work, people are generally kinder to each other because it's not about who can position themselves in a certain way in the organization. It's about driving toward results so that we can all be efficient with our work and frankly, leave work as soon as we possibly can and engage with our family and our communities, the things that really matter in the grand scheme of life.
Awesome. Lawrence, I saw you pointing and kind of with a thumbs up type.
I swear it's like you just piped that straight out of my brain, Darren. Like every single part of it. The way I've described it is like the office allowed us to be lazy in our practices, and we could get by with a lot of it simply, you know, as people tell me, like I could just through osmosis get an understanding of what's going on with my team. But you can't have that same osmosis if you're located in different places, right? You need to have a system in place. You need to have that rigor, right? And so the real question then is, what do you measure and what is too much to measure, right? And so this is the part where I've really subscribed to this idea. I take a lot from movie quotes. And so there's a movie quote from Days of Thunder: loose is fast and on the edge of out of control. And so that idea where I don't need to know what you're doing to the minute. In fact, I don't want to know. Do whatever you're going to do, right? But it is exactly what you're talking about, results driven, right? Are you actually delivering results and not, are you pushing, like, do you have output? It's what's the impact of the work that you're doing. And so that is really the key. And when you get back to it, it's exactly what Darren was talking about, right? Getting into those conversations. What is your definition of done? What are you trying to achieve? What is the scope that you're going after? Not everybody understands what we're doing. Tell me specifically what you're trying to achieve, right? How is this going to move it? And then not all of those things necessarily need to tie back to a KPI or a measure of some sort, but many do, right? And in that case, this is what we're going after. This is how we're going to know if we're successful, right? And if you know that up front, that's what I need to see from you, right? And if you can do that, this gets back to, and I think we have this on our agenda for later, but the idea of flexible schedules, right? If you can do that in an hour a day, then you can choose that, you know, I'm going to be productive in an hour a day. I don't need 8 hours a day, or I can put in 8 of those hours. And you know what, really, I'm going to punch way above my weight, but that's then your choice.
Lawrence, is there anything that you are using when you're thinking about tracking or those KPIs? Like, is there something that your team aligns or drives to together?
I mean, everything for us is really driven by merchant value, right? So at Shopify, we're really obsessed with merchants. And so all of our metrics and KPIs at a product level really orient around the merchant. Even if you look at that at the top level, you're looking at gross merchandise value, or GMV, right? This is not measuring how much money Shopify is making on the platform, but rather the cumulative sales of all of our merchants on the platform. And so we can drive that down into each of the sub products that we offer as well. And so we do this within money engineering, which is what I run too. And so this, I think, gets to the point of like, how do you engage people and tie them to it? Well, why are you at work? And again, getting back to that point, like, it is about the work. It is about the mission. This is the thing that unites us. There's many things that divide us, but this is actually what unites us at this time. This is why we've come together as a group, as a company, as an organization, whatever happens to be. It's about whatever we're trying to achieve as our mission right now. And that ultimately is, how we've oriented our measures, our KPIs.
Okay, awesome. Now, Chris, I know for a fact that you're pretty big on metrics, data signals, tracking the health of your team, your systems, your products. So what kind of metrics are you using over there at GigSmart?
That's a great question. We use a lot. And I think I collect way more than I need at any given time because, there's data and then there's information. So I think we have like key signals that we're looking for. But when I'm interested in, digging into something more fully, I want the raw data to give me additional context. Context is king, as people like to say. But I think KPIs for us, you measure what matters, right? And you make those available to the team. And if you put it out to the team's going to achieve it, right? So you have to be very intentional. And when you come into an organization, you should look at what's important to that organization's success, and that's what you should focus on. And I think we sometimes get into a mode where we're afraid to change what's important to us. We get used to putting the same slide deck together every month or every quarter for the board, and doing the same thing every time. But it's okay to also say, this metric doesn't matter to us as much anymore, or this is no longer a key focus for us because we have solved this problem by and large. We're still going to track it and pay attention to it as an indicator if something goes wrong. But this one's starting to take a back seat. We've had that happen over the last couple of years. And so don't be afraid to change things, but you have to, transparency is what matters most, right? Your team can't achieve what you want them to or what the organization needs them to unless they understand what it is. And more importantly, they have to agree with it, right? So like you can't walk in and mandate and say, the number of code commits is what matters this week, or the number of merge requests that go through is what matters this week, or the number of tickets that you complete and the number of points. Like those are all meaningless unless there's some larger goal that everybody understands and is trying to achieve. For us, we're extremely results oriented. Nothing else matters, right? To us, it's delivery to the customer. It's delivery to production, making sure that, performance improvements make it out there. And we immediately measure all results of every single one of those things. But I think it's easy to measure things like code commits, and it's easy to measure how many times you release to production today or this week or this month. What's hard is understanding indirect impact. We kind of have a concept at the leadership level for GigSmart that we've been talking about a lot in engineering, because if you make a sales call and you log that sales call, there's a time that you're talking to a customer. There's a deal that eventually closes or doesn't. It's a very straightforward metric. But what's hard to measure in engineering are things like indirect impact. Like, what's the effect that a senior engineer has on a junior engineer skilling up, right? And so we talk about things in terms of direct impact and indirect impact. And we really want to look at that person as a whole. So I try to track additional things like, how many days a week are people pushing code? Are they pushing code because they're feeling stressed? Are they pushing code because they're interested in the problem? Are there things that I need to be paying attention to? Should I be encouraging people to take more PTO? Can I bring my HR system into it to give me an additional data lens to say, these people are working way too much. They're scrambling. Do we need to change these dates? Should I be working with marketing to adjust what's coming? Should I be talking to them about taking a proactive vacation because we've all been locked up for so long? Have they not actually taken care of themselves? Metrics it's easy to reduce things to spreadsheets, but this is a very human-driven thing that we do. It's creative. We need to really take care of our people as well.
Shweta, I saw you come off mute before, and Darren, I see some reactions. Feel free to jump in or respond to Chris.
Yeah, I really liked what Chris said. Like when you measure so much, right? Like you focus on what's important, but at times it's also to realize that, hey, this metric is not useful. It's not giving us information, or we're not going to care about it in the same way. So I really resonated with that, and just wanted to say +1 on doing that. And for in our world, like the single most metric that matters is provision success rate or failure rate, and the time to provision, right? So that includes plethora of things that happen underneath it to make it successful week after week. So that's how we look at it as well. So.
Great.
And metrics have this dangerous way of being only additive and not subtractive, as if you can only add metrics, but you can't subtract them. It's really key to create a psychologically safe atmosphere where people can always question, is this metric still valuable to us, or has it run its course? Should we delete it or move on from that? Another thing that I want to mention on the topic of well-being is there's a gentleman named John Fitch. He authored this book called Time Off. He's been a guest speaker at GitLab a couple of times, and he has instilled some amazing snippets that are now proliferating through our organization and others. But he likes to say that we are creative athletes, we're knowledge athletes, and time off is for pros. If you look at sports athletes, time off and rest is a critical part of them actually achieving gold medals and the like. And the same is true in knowledge work. Rest is actually a component of doing better work. It's not in competition with work. And if you doubt that, try to work nonstop for 2 years without taking any rest, and then compare yourself to someone who does take rest. And by the end of that 2 years, you will be in far worse shape, and the quality of your work will be far worse than someone who actually strategically integrated rest as a component of that. He actually brings up this piece of research from a really long time ago by Graham Wallace, social psychologist out of England, who shows that the 4 stages of the creative process, there are 4 of them, and 2 of them can only be activated at rest. And so if you want innovation and creativity in your team, you actually have to bake rest in. And when mentions of no meetings Wednesdays, for example, that's a moment where you can get the other half of the creative process going. And that's why you see so many companies leaning into it, because there's this aha moment of, oh, it actually makes work better and more creative and innovative. And that is a massive change for Western culture and North American corporation mindset in general.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm so happy you brought that up. And there is kind of a culture shift. Like you're saying, you can see it in sports. Actually, rest is being encouraged instead of going all the time or playing every single game. And you can see it in engineering organizations with the no meeting Wednesdays, or for example, time off every Friday. I am going to now move us on to our third topic. So our third topic is hiring and onboarding. So, to me today, it feels like offering the flexibility or that remote work style is necessary for most companies if you're trying to retain and recruit top talent. Not to mention also it kind of enables that genuine, authentic diversity within a team. So Chris, we're actually going to start off with you here. Could you walk us through your remote hiring process?
Yeah. It's been fun. We've done a number of hires through remote, and the interview process is pretty much the same for us. We do like an introductory call where there's kind of the pitch for the company, what we do, kind of give the candidate context, answer any and all questions that they have, and do some questioning back. And then, they'll move on to a panel interview. So it's the same thing. It's just on Zoom, right? For us, it's important to us. I make no hires that anyone says no to, because my key focus is the team belongs to you, not to me. I'm here to help guide and orchestrate and unblock, but I'm not here to control the team. And every person that we add changes the team, right? Always for good, hopefully. But every person that you add changes the culture a little bit. So the team is usually very self-aware of we're lacking this thing, and they might be looking for it in someone, and I want them to be able to select that person. It sounds weird, but I'm largely uninvolved other than the initial interview and kind of the closing interview. If the full team says yes, and we send out a survey after these panel interviews to everybody, and the last question on it is, would you support making a full-time offer of employment to this person? If everybody says yes, then we don't mind moving forward. We feel good about it. So it's largely the same. It's just remote. And I think what's changed for us is Denver, which is where I am, is a hotbed for software talent, like a lot of cities. And we're all competing in a relatively small downtown corridor. What's different now is that a lot of people like to live a little bit outside the city. There's a lot of mountains here. We've got the Rocky Mountains here. There's lots of hiking and trails and what have you. And I personally live down south in the suburbs and did not enjoy the commute downtown to the office. It's always under construction. It's a lot of time spent in a car, and that doesn't exist anymore. So I'm able to look wherever I want for talent, which is great. And people can live wherever they want, right? Which is a huge benefit, right? It's your life. You're donating a huge portion of your life to us. And we're supporting you with, compensation, learning opportunities and all these things in a great community. But ultimately, you're giving a lot of time to this company. And, it's an easy sell to say, where you live is far less important, right? We've been sad not to get together as a group. We're a very social bunch, the core group of this company. And we obviously used to do a lot of things together in person. And we had our first get-together event recently. But for the people that are in Brazil or the Ukraine or wherever we are around the world, like they can't go to those events anyway. So, it's always good to still do things as like happy hours on Slack and what have you.
Shweta, how are you doing? You've done some remote hiring, I think, for a while. How does that compare to what Chris is saying, or how are you approaching it?
Yeah, I've hired a lot of people remote, like I think close to 100 now, because I've been doing remote before it was normal. So it's pretty much like, we fine-tune the process as we have gone through it so many times, but it's like a chronological interview which goes into the person's motivations, history, what they want to do, a match to the role, and then there's a technical round followed by a panel. And one thing we do for closing, like we do a debrief, like Chris said, like we do get inputs from everyone before we make a decision on whom to hire, and completely agree with the fact that if you add a new person, the whole team's culture changes. You have to revisit that and focus on onboarding as well, right? Like when the teams are small and you're trying to scale them up to a good size. So one thing which we have done sometimes to help close is that we have had like our senior leaders talk to some of the candidates and do that extra, not a formal interview, but like a closing round to get them excited about our mission and vision. And one thing which has also helped is if we really like the candidate, people have all gotten on the call along with the recruiter to say that how they really want this person to be part of the team, and that has also helped with when competing with other companies or in time sensitive situations. So it's pretty much the same process. It's just adopting to remote tools and being mindful of every stage doing its job, because otherwise you end up wasting a bunch of time for your whole panel, and you want to make sure that you identify those bottlenecks.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing those tips. I think we heard earlier on, maybe Darren might have said, or could have been Lawrence, but having the ability to offer flexibility in the workplace for potential employees, is something that can help with hiring and retention. Lawrence, I was gonna, flip it over to you here. Is the flexibility something you view as crucial to Shopify's hiring and retention strategy for developers?
I think it's pretty important, right? And something that we certainly offer, but it's good to think that there's different versions of flexibility. And so in tech, for a long time, my entire career, we've had hour flexibility. Like I've never worked a 9 to 5 job, right? I've had flexibility in when I work, but there's also the location where I work from. But to take a step back from this, because I think this is a topic that comes up a lot, right? And I see it a lot, like every employer needs to offer this. This is what everybody wants. And I think that's really an echo chamber of a lot of the voices, like those of us on this panel who will really value this. But I want to present an alternative view, which is if you take the step back and you look at what's important to me as an individual in my work, right? And I like to think of it as work should fit within your life, not life should fit within your work. But you really need to assess what's important to you. And for some people, that's going to be, I want to be in an office. I want to be working with other people. I want to travel downtown. I enjoy my commute, right? That is okay. But the point is you need to then find an employer that matches your needs. And your needs can be associated with where you're going to work, the kind of amenities you have, the compensation that you get, benefits, health benefits for me are very important as well. So there's all of these components that go into your job. I think what we're seeing right now is more and more people get on board with this the flexibility that's being afforded by more employers that wasn't typically afforded by that many, right? You had fewer options when it came to employment if you were going to go with a fully remote position. And so that really limited your options as an individual. And now your options have expanded and many more companies are embracing this, which is a great thing for me personally and for many of us who fall into this situation and want this as a benefit. But I would just stop us a bit short of saying that every company needs to offer this or this is the only way. I actually don't think that it is the only way from talking with even people on my own team who really kind of long for some of the experience that they had previously, right? And at Shopify, we had excellent offices. There was just an outstanding experience of coming into work and being in a Shopify space. It was so well designed, and that's gone, right? Like we're remote, and you've replaced that with a different type of experience. For me, this is a superior experience. I get to spend more time with my family. I don't have to spend 2 hours a day commuting, but that's not necessarily true for everybody. So I think it's good to keep that in mind, but it's really a question of individual preference and what's important to you and what really drives you. And there are many of us for whom the flexibility of where we work is very, very important, but that's also true on the other side where it's very important to a group of people to be in a specific location.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great thoughts there. Darren, I know that you've done some advising, I think, for companies on remote hiring, leadership roles. Like, what's your take on all this?
One of the things that we start with is hiring for values fit, not culture fit. And we take this very literally. During the interview stage, we will pull up the GitLab values page, which is public. Anyone can Google GitLab values and take a look at those. And we want to talk with people and find out, do these ways of working resonate with you? Because our values page, it's more than words on a wall. It's the literal operating guide on how we treat each other. Short toes is a great example. We collaborate with short toes. No one can step on anyone else's toes because everyone at GitLab has short toes. That very literally, tangibly conveys to people how you are expected to collaborate. And there are lots of these sub-values, we call them substantiators of values. And we want to make sure that's front and center because, to an earlier point, you want people to join your organization and know that they're going to align with the specific way that you're working. And this goes into Lawrence's point, which is COVID has forced companies to be explicit about who they are. And you want people to have the ability to self-select into the atmosphere that most resonates with them, that most aligns with what matters to them. And I know this might sound crazy, but there are some organizations that will come out of COVID and will double down on the rigidity. And they will say, we don't want ultimate flexibility. But the slight silver lining in that is I think now they'll have to convert that to explicit messaging on their careers page so that when you show up and look for a job there, it specifically says, no flexibility offered, but we have amazing offices. And if you're in a season of your life where that matters the most to you, at least now you know, and you don't go through a 6-month interview process with some other view of how flexibility is, only to join the company and find out a few months down the road that it is actually nothing like you thought it would be. This has happened for years at GitLab. We convey what our strategy is, what it's like to work at GitLab. You know all of this before you even apply. And so that makes our recruiting funnel very, very pure. People don't accidentally join GitLab. They know exactly what they're getting into. They want an all remote environment because of the perks that it offers, and it matters specifically to them. So I do think we'll see a lot of companies converting tacit or the unspoken rules of culture and the ways of working to explicit because they have no choice. I think one of the democratizing factors of COVID is that everyone coming out of COVID can now go into a job interview and ask, what's your stance on workplace flexibility? For a lot of people, they're still figuring out what they want, but at least that question now can be asked and it's not taboo.
Yeah, actually, really good point. Because I mean, the worst thing that can happen is you're hiring someone that's really not a good fit because you're not explicit about how we work. Now, the other side to hiring after you make a hire, a new engineer coming on, is the onboarding, getting them ramped up and effective. Shweta, I'm going to start with you. Is there anything that you're doing for remote onboarding or any special tips that you learned of how to make that effective for new engineers?
Yeah, definitely. So I think when we used to have office or used to go to office for onboarding, even if we were remote, right, it was a very special experience. Like you would be greeted with like a lot of company swag. You would have a walk through the hallways, meet people who work from office, and then do a lot of social activities to get to know the person really, right? But we try our best to replicate that in a remote environment. So we definitely send like a welcome package to our new hires. But more importantly, we pair them up with a buddy who can act as like someone who is the your go-to person for questions you don't want to ask, maybe your manager or whoever, and then also in some cases a mentor if the person joining is a junior or an intern, where they feel comfortable like, this person is going to help me get through my first PR or get me comfortable with the domain that I'm working with. And we craft like a onboarding plan, and it's actually like a document template where you list out in first week these are the tools you need to get on to get access. And the idea is that we want someone to commit code to production as early as possible, right? And that is a metric we measure, and it has gone down significantly as we have hired more and done more onboarding, because earlier the ramp up used to be very high in terms of someone getting used to all remote tooling and starting to contribute. So those are some of the things we have done, and we also introduce them in the all hands that happens every Monday. So it's also like the whole org can learn about, hey, who is this new person, and associate a face to the name if they don't really cross paths on a daily basis.
Hey, excellent. Darren, at GitLab, you've been onboarding engineers and retaining engineers for a while here. What are some of the best practices that you've used to help engineers become effective, as quickly as possible?
2x what Shweta said on onboarding buddies. So we use this, take this approach. We have a guide on onboarding buddies. So anyone who's listening can just Google that and copy it. It's all open source on how we do it. It works really well to pair a new hire with someone who's been at the company. One of the interesting positive elements of doing this is that when you think about onboarding in a co-located company in the past, generally you would advise a new hire to just wander around the floor or the office building and run into people and strike up conversations. And that's how you build your work network. Number one, that's extremely inefficient. Number two, it's an absolute nightmare for introverts. And so the onboarding buddy takes that away and instead looks at the new hire, looks at their job, and then looks at the network of people in the organization and sets up key stakeholder meetings for them. They intentionally put meetings on the calendar, these intro meetings with the people that will actually matter in their job, the people who need to be known. Much more efficient process and much less awkward. You know that the new hire, when they go into these key meetings to begin with, that this person they're meeting with will be someone they work with throughout the course of their tenure at the company. So that alone is worth using onboarding buddies. The second part here is make sure that your onboarding process is heavily documented. At GitLab, we use the GitLab platform. We dog food to onboard people. When you start, you have a new hire checklist. I think it's at 100 or 200 different checkboxes. Some of them are small. Don't get overwhelmed with that. But the point of mentioning that is it's so explicit that you can't get it wrong. You literally can see, have you checked all the boxes or not? And your manager can peek in there and see if the person is on track. And then it's very easy to say like, oh, I see you're on week 4, but there's still some week 2 tasks that aren't completed. Is there anything I can do to unblock you? And so by making onboarding that explicit, it actually helps other people help the new hire by seeing what may be missing or what needs to be added. The third thing I'll mention here is make sure that your onboarding is malleable. We allow everyone to contribute. And I was an onboarding for a designer who joined the company. I asked the designer, hey, how is onboarding going? Is there anything you would change? And she said, it's been going great, but I miss the camaraderie of an on-site onboarding process. And it dawned on me that we have a new GitLab team member Slack channel where anyone in a given week who joins is put into a cohort. And I thought, well, there's nothing stopping this person from spinning up a Zoom room with all of these people who are joining across the company and going through onboarding together. And so we added that to the onboarding process. We assigned the merge request to our people team. They merged it. And so just like that, a designer who was only a few weeks in and had no classical HR training made our onboarding process better. That's an incredibly powerful way to start your tenure at a company. And so for those companies who can do that, make sure that you listen to employees and take their feedback.
Yeah, that's really cool. It reminds me of the coffee talk thing, Chris, to kind of keep that open Zoom room. Chris, I saw you nodding your head, maybe doubling down on the onboarding buddy, but what are you all doing on your side for remote onboarding?
Yeah, we started onboarding somebody on Monday of this week out of Pakistan, which is definitely a different time zone than we have here. But in the overlap, it's join coffee talk. Start getting used to those processes. Sit in on stand up, participate. We want to get to participation as fast as possible because it makes you feel like you belong, right? We don't want outsiders. We don't want somebody to come in and immediately feel like they're not sure what to do. So by being in coffee talk and being able to see the rest of the team from different, different focuses, QA, product, design, et cetera, you have this like free flow of information. So what I tend to do is we do the same thing. Onboarding buddies are huge, right? But I try to balance them out, and I try to create a process where they have to seek out different onboarding buddies, or really those onboarding buddies kind of come to them, right? But from different areas, so that they feel comfortable asking questions. Especially, we happen to be an Elixir backend, which is not everybody's strong suit. Elixir's not, it's not like you hire a front end developer and they have a ton of Elixir experience. So, getting everything up and going, we want to make sure that they feel comfortable asking that backend team. Can they go get information from them? So. We get them used to moving through those different breakout rooms, talking to different people, getting to success as fast as possible, and then shepherding through our merge request process. We use GitLab and an approval process to go through MRs, and they do QA and acceptance as part of the MR. We stand up a dynamic environment for them inside that, and so getting them through that process of, this is what success looks like. We're modeling it with you. We're alongside you. We're leading you to success very quickly, as fast as possible, so that you continue to model that and embrace that.
Yeah, really cool. And, to kind of close out the topic here, Lawrence, what do you have going on? Is there anything that you have learned or tips for what has worked for onboarding new engineers?
Yeah, I think, to not repeat, because there's a lot that's similar in what all my friends here have said. We have a structured onboarding program. I think at our scale, a couple of the challenges that we have are being opinionated. There's simply too much information. The fire hose is a real thing that people talk about, and they've talked about it everywhere I've worked at, but it's very true at Shopify as well. And so that really requires us being opinionated about what it is that you need to learn up front and giving you that guidance. So much to Darren's point, it's not about cruising the halls and finding people to meet with. Here's an opinionated list of people who I think you should interact with over your first month. having a defined program. And so that defined program is going to teach you about Shopify, about who we are. It's going to get you interacting with merchants through a stint in support. And then it's going to teach you the fundamental tech if you don't know it. But it's not so regimented where everyone has to go through a Ruby training, for example. But you can actually look at that and say, this is what I need to know. Do I know this already? I can skip this and move on to the next one. And that's true across the board. And then as you move into your teams, the same sort of thing applies at the team level. Now, there's kind of two pieces to this that I think are challenging for us at the scale of our growth. And to give you a sense, like I run money engineering. And so money engineering today is around 150 people, and I've hired 43 people in the first half of this year. So like that's the rate of growth that we're talking about within my slice of engineering. And so when you're growing that quickly, you kind of invalidate some of these assumptions. Like if I assign one buddy to everybody, which we've done historically, then we quickly overload the team onboarding everybody. And so one of the ways to think about Shopify is an ongoing experiment in how to build and operate a company, right? And I think other companies may agree with this statement about themselves as well, but this is something that we're explicit with ourselves. And so something that I'm experimenting with in the second half of the year is onboarding cohorts. And so we have the onboarding cohort within, we were talking about onboarding to the company. And then when you onboard within a team, because we're not doing individual one at a time, but rather trying to load up teams of multiple people who are starting at similar timeframes and can go through this experience together. And this gets to the second challenge, which I think is really something that we've seen within remote. And it's not building the engagement with the company. That's not been a challenge for us. It's not building the engagement or the social aspects within the team. The feedback has been very positive about that. It's really about building those personal relationships. And if you're building those personal relationships, it gets back to something I was talking about earlier, which is really pairing and having that shared experience with someone else or with a small group of people. And so this is really what this experiment is about. It's having this shared experience of onboarding with a team and learning about the team together, using each other, right? Not having to step on other people's toes or worry about asking stupid questions, because you're all going through this at the same time. In the extreme case, I have a team that will be starting later this year that's being built out now, which will include the manager and all the members of the team. And I'm looking for sort of one seasoned Shopify person to anchor within that team and help them along. But the rest of the team will be brand new to Shopify and will be onboarding at the same time. And they will, at this point, like everyone else who's onboarded in the past year and a bit, almost year and a half at this point, has not met anybody in person. So it's, again, back to that experimentation, being opinionated about what it is that we share, and ultimately you learning how to be effective and how to discover information for yourself at the company, because that's really the place where we need you to get to.
That's an amazing experience. What a rapid growth, 40 new members in the first half. We'll have to check back in with you in the second half of the year to see if there's any other learnings or, how your changes have gone. I'm going to push us on to our final topic today. So our final topic of this great discussion that we've been having is around people and culture. So, as leaders, it's our job to set the tone and enable successful remote work cultures. And when this is done right, remote teams can enable inclusiveness, empowerment. Our employees can have freedom and autonomy and much, much more. So Lawrence, we'll come back to you. How do you balance team cohesiveness and cultural goals with the need to not overload employees with too many meetings? What are you doing around culture these days?
Yeah, it's really gets back to this part about not trying to be too prescriptive with how the teams operate, right? And different teams like to do this in different ways. So there's lots of kind of shared social avenues at Shopify, particularly through Slack, and lots of Slack channels based on your interest. And we have a whole social Slack workspace as well, where all of this takes place, and there's thousands of channels. But within the individual teams, there's going to be some team events that are run in the larger areas. There's going to be team events. This is one where, to put it out there, I don't think we're perfect at this. We're continuing to learn, right? What is the right balance of time to spend on this? One of the things that I've learned is do my best to schedule these events during work hours, right? Like this is a work activity. It's not a social activity that would take place afterwards. And I think people were trying to replace I'm going to go for dinner with some of my friends at work and do that here. But back to where we started, and like myself being done with video calls by the end of the day, other people have things going on in their lives. And so trying to treat this as, if I want you to build these relationships with your peers, it's in the spirit of doing this for work. And so doing that during work hours. Otherwise, it just gets back to making sure that we read the room, right? If the team is pushing towards a deadline, probably not the best time to do social events. If they're overloaded or they're tired, also maybe not the best time, or maybe it is, right? But it's really this part that I think Chris was alluding to earlier, where there's this whole psychology around managing an engineering team that is really difficult to measure, right? And it's not something that you can dictate from up on high, aside from pay attention to your team and the needs and this particular nuance of that team itself and the individuals that comprise it.
Chris, I know for you, speaking of you, you base your dev culture on 8 virtues in Bushido Samurai code. How are those making an impact in your remote environment?
We have a very strong team-based culture. It's very intentionally around success together. And I think the way that we've codified that, which I think that there's like a LinearB page dedicated to this, but you can read about them there. We are big on sacrificing for each other. And when I say that, it sounds dramatic, but we were talking about KPIs earlier, right? And people kind of get attached to metrics and things like that. And one of the things that I'm really proud of on our team is that you might be in the middle of a goal, or you might be, focused on something, but aware that you have a teammate that's struggling with a problem that they're trying to solve. And because we're so big on exposing context to everybody and keeping everybody engaged on what the company's problems are, you will recognize that that's an important thing to solve. And so you might sacrifice, to use the metaphor again, what the thing is that you're working on in order to engage with that person. Normally we would just look at that as we'd increase our pairing time or what have you, but it's very intentional, right? We want to succeed together. You don't have success in an organization because there's one member of a development team that is so amazing that they've done everything. And especially you're talking about 150 people, right? Like there's no one single person on that team that's holding that entire team together, right? It should be a shared culture. It's a shared vision. It's a shared execution. And so I think our culture really, really plays well to that. And the people that onboard into it and they see that we're putting front and center things like assume positive intent, focus on collaborating, on pairing, on working together to accomplish the goal, not focusing on whether or not you completed that 5-point ticket or that 2-point ticket or the number of bugs that you eliminated in the system, but rather what did the team accomplish this week? What were we able to get across the line together? I think it's so easy to create a hero worship culture, but it's toxic. And it's especially toxic for support roles, right? QA is incredibly important. Product is incredibly important. Design is incredibly important, right? This is a team sport, and it's critical that you create an ethos and understanding that everybody is contributing to, getting us going in the right direction and having success.
Awesome, Chris. Thanks for sharing. Shweta, what are some of the specific things your organization does to keep that positive and happy culture?
Yeah, especially with remote work and everything going on, right? Like it's hard to assume that everyone is gonna be always happy and rainbows and unicorns, right? So the first thing we do is like listen to people and empathize. Like leading with empathy is a big thing that we are trying to hone in at every level of leadership, whether you're an IC or a manager. But one thing that we are doing specifically is we are doing a virtual hackathon. So we've done these before, but this was another one that came from employee suggestions where they wanted to really have a casual way of building something cool together across teams, not just working with the usual folks that they work with on a day-to-day basis. So we have a hack week where people are hacking most of the week, and then we have demos and prizes happening in July. But it's also like if someone is not so inclined to hack on a new project, they can use that time to solve any tech debt issues or any bugs they want to squash. So that way there is no pressure of like spending 24 hours straight hacking up something. So that has been useful. But I think at the end of the day, it's like knowing that people can feel safe and that they belong and that they matter is what really makes them feel like this is a place they want to be in, and that's what boils down to like psychological safety, and then making sure you don't take that for granted, right? Like you have to work hard as a leader to keep doing it again and again.
Yeah, absolutely. Trust and safety, super important for highly collaborative teams. And Darren, what advice would you have for us or for a first-time remote manager or a leader that's trying to do a great job with people and culture? Any tips from you?
Yeah, I'm going to do a shameless plug. So the first tip would be go to allremote.info and download the remote playbook. There's an entire chapter in there on being a great remote manager, and that comes from a lot of collective experience across the GitLab organization. The other thing I would encourage you to do is take a look at the link between transparency and visibility in work and the sense of belonging that you can create within your team. So GitLab polled over 3,000 people earlier this year to compile the remote work report. There's a lot of amazing data in there. You can check that out, Google remote work report from GitLab. But one of the things that I found most interesting was a link between making work and goals and objectives and metrics more transparent across the entire company. It actually increased the sense of belonging in team members. So a lot of people are trying to tackle this problem from the pure human culture standpoint. We want to make people feel like they belong. But it turns out if you just give people more access to what other teams are working towards, they feel like a greater part of the team. So someone in engineering can look across at comms or marketing or legal and see what they're working on for this quarter. Now suddenly they feel like a stronger part of the team, even if they don't actually work on that work day to day. And so this is something, again, I think this should be done in any organization, co-located, hybrid, all remote. But it is something to consider as a great remote manager. Take a look at the structure that you're walking into and ask yourself, could we be more transparent? Could there be more visibility across teams to what people are working on? And so opening those gates enables your team to do a lot more self-service and feel like they're moving towards a common goal. And giving people that purpose is really critical. There's been lots of research on fostering purpose over urgency. And as a leader, you want to do everything you can to secure that purpose so that you don't need to ask for that urgency as often.
Great. That's actually amazing advice. And what an incredible conversation we had today. I want to thank all of our guests for sharing their knowledge and experiences with us today. And thank you so much, everyone that has attended our watch party, for tuning in. Thank you for joining us, folks. My name is Dan Lines. I'm the COO and co-founder of LinearB. Our tool helps teams like yours continuously improve by providing the data, the context, and the automation within your software delivery lifecycle. LinearB is free for dev teams, so check it out at linearb.io. Until next time, see you on the Dev Interrupted podcast and join us in the Dev Interrupted Discord community to keep these kinds of discussions going all week long. And one more time, thank you to all of our panelists.